Okay, this is going to be a video talking about the Ludendorff Offensive, and it's primarily aimed at Year 11 because the Ludendorff Offensive was something that came up, or something that could have been mentioned on the First World War exam that Year 11 have just taken, and I noticed that a few of you got a bit confused with the Ludendorff Offensive. You didn't maybe put enough detail in about the actual offensive itself, or you got it confused with other events in World War One. And it's important. It's something that's worth knowing. So, as I say, a quick video on the Ludendorff Offensive to hopefully clear up any confusion over that. Remember, Year 11, you've not got very long before the summer GCSE exams. They'll be here before you know it. So please, can you make sure that, as per usual, I'll leave the comments open below. So if you have any requests for any future videos, then let me know, and I'll try and make some in the future. But as well, please make sure that you're attending history help sessions every Tuesday lunchtime. That's what they're there for. If you're confused about a certain topic or subject, or if you need help with certain types of exam questions, please make sure, Year 11, that you are attending history help sessions with me every Tuesday lunchtime in M16. But as I say, going back to this video, the Ludendorff Offensive, that's what I'm going to talk about. So the Ludendorff Offensive, otherwise known as the Spring Offensive, is an offensive by the Germans. I mean, the Ludendorff part kind of gives it away. German name, as you know, he's in charge of the German armed forces. So the Ludendorff Offensive takes place in the spring of 1918. But just to give you a little bit of context, what that means in terms of the overall kind of picture of the war, the USA, as we know, declared war on Germany on the 6th of April 1917. Excuse me, just altering my chair. Now, I mentioned this in a previous video when I talked about the war at sea. There are two main reasons why America get involved in the First World War, why they declare war on Germany. And what the main reason really is that the Germans resume unrestricted U-boat warfare. As I say, I've talked about that already in the previous video on the war at sea, on the U-boats video. But when the Germans relaunch unrestricted U-boat warfare in 1917, that really angers America, and it's one of the main reasons why they get involved in the war in the first place. Another reason is the Zimmermann telegram. Now, don't worry, Year 11, if you've forgotten about that, because we did do this way back last year in Year 10. But the Zimmermann telegram is a telegram, so a message, sent from Germany to the Mexican government. And it's a message from the German Foreign Secretary called Zimmermann to Mexico, and it says that Germany will help Mexico attack America in return for help. So, we'll help you attack America because Mexico had certain claims, or they tried to claim certain parts of the southern part of America, like Texas and New Mexico. So Germany said, we'll help you invade America if you help us in the First World War. The Americans intercept this, or the British intercepted it and showed it to America, and this was another reason why America got involved, because they thought, well, that's a bit underhand and a bit wrong of the Germans, so that's another reason why they get involved. Main reason, though, is unrestricted U-boat warfare. Another thing that happens before the Ludendorff Offensive, so obviously we've got America now joining Britain and France, the Allies, in the war effort. But another thing that happens before the Ludendorff Offensive is you get revolution in Russia, okay, in October 1917. And this brings Russia out of the war, okay. So it's actually the second, as I've put there, second revolution in Russia in a year. They'd had a previous revolution in February 1917. But after the February Revolution, they'd stayed in the war because the provisional government that had taken over Russia kept Russia in the First World War. But the new government that takes over in October 1917, the Bolshevik government, they immediately pulled Russia out of the war. Which for the Germans is a stroke of luck, because when America have joined the war, or declared war I should say, in April 1917, very briefly the Germans have been thinking, oh my god, we've got to fight the Russians still on the Eastern Front, and now we've got to fight Britain, France and America on the Western Front. But in the space of a few months we go from that to Russia, as you've seen, pulling out of the war. After October 1917 they say, right, we're done. So for the Germans, it's a huge stroke of luck because they can now pull all of the troops that they've got on the Eastern Front over to the Western Front to help fight, well, America and Britain and France. But they needed to act very quickly because the USA were taking a while to get their troops to the Western Front. You know, it wasn't they declared war in April and suddenly all the American troops are there. It takes a while to get them across. You know, obviously they've got to cross the Atlantic and then get to Britain and get themselves ready and then go across to the Western Front. So it takes a while for America to actually really get a huge amount of men on the Western Front. So the Germans are thinking, right, now's the time to move. We've got to really go for this before the Americans arrive en masse. We've got to try and take out, well, France and hopefully Britain, or try and win the war basically before America get here. Now they've been able to move 500,000 men from the Russian front over to the Western front, which is, as I said before, a huge bonus for them. And this is kind of what kick-starts the Ludendorff Offensive in the spring of 1918. It takes a bit of organising, but then in March 1918, Ludendorff launches his offensive. Okay, now the aim of this offensive, just get a bit of paper. He aimed to break the stalemate on the Western Front. Now, as we know, stalemate on the Western Front, we've got the British and the French in their trenches, and we've got the Germans in their trenches, and there's no movement. Okay, it's been a war of well, stalemate really. There hasn't been much movement in the space of 4 years. So Ludendorff's thinking we've got to break the stalemate and hopefully very quickly take Britain and France out of the war. So what he does is, rather cleverly, is he targets the weakest areas of the British, excuse me, just put the paper away, he targets the weakest areas of the British and the French trenches, or their trench system, their lines. So on the 21st of March 1918, 600 German guns bombard the British and the French trenches for 5 hours, and then they release deadly clouds of mustard gas on the British and French trenches, and then the stormtroopers come out to play that we've talked about before. They're specially trained troops, stormtroopers. They're used to target the front line. They're hidden by the gas, because they're wearing gas masks. They're hidden by the gas, and they move very quickly into, as I said before, the British and the French lines, and quickly smash through these lines and push the British and the French back quite a bit. Leads to a British retreat. Thousands of British troops are captured or killed. It's a really, really effective strategy at first. Really effective. You know, by July 1918, the Germans had advanced 65 kilometres. So they'd made a huge amount of ground up. I'll show you a map in a minute to show you just how much land they'd gained. They'd actually got within firing range of Paris. They could now fire their artillery at Paris. So you know, the original, if you go back to the Schlieffen Plan, the original aim of the Schlieffen Plan, finally, you know, the Germans have got within firing range of Paris. It's taken them 4 years, but they finally managed it, and the Ludendorff Offensive is the reason why they've been able to do that. However, the Ludendorff Offensive does fail, and I'll tell you why in a second. Well, I'll tell you now. One of the reasons is that 20,000 new American soldiers who are fresh, they arrived just in time, really, to stop the offensive. It stops, really, the Ludendorff Offensive. It stops in July 1918 at the Second Battle of the Marne. Okay, that's when the American troops, alongside the British and the French and the Allies, managed to stop this German offensive. It's been going and going and going and going and going, and then finally in July 1918 they managed to stop it. They put a halt to the Germans. So that's pretty much when the Ludendorff Offensive ends. And part of the reason, as I say, is because of these 20,000 American troops that arrive. But what are the other reasons why the Ludendorff Offensive fails? Well, first of all, as I say, it's been a success at first. The Allied forces had to retreat. The Germans had got close to Paris and they had broken the stalemate. So when you look at it, on the face of it, you think, wow, that's a great success, because Ludendorff's aimed to break this stalemate. He's aimed to get to Paris, or at least close to Paris. He's managed both of those things. As you've seen, the British and the Allies have been on the retreat. So on the face of it, you go, wow, what a major success. It's not. Okay, it's actually a fairly catastrophic failure, the Ludendorff Offensive. And it's a failure for several reasons. Number one, Ludendorff had sent far too many men forward at once into French territory. 400,000 German soldiers have been killed. You think about that, 400,000. They've pulled over 500,000 from the Russian front, and 400,000 have been killed. So huge, huge numbers. Basically, that advantage, that numerical advantage they'd had, from pulling the troops over from the Russian front has pretty much been wiped out in the space of 3 or 4 months. So that's one reason why it's a failure. They lose 400,000 soldiers, and there are no more men to replace it. I've talked about this in a previous video. The Germans haven't got huge reserves of soldiers left, so every loss they feel it. The Germans also advanced way too far and too fast into French territory. I'll show this map here. You can see here these areas are where they've made a huge advance. So that was the old trench line, if you will. And by the end of the Ludendorff Offensive, they pushed this far. So you can see they do gain huge amounts of land, but they've gone too far and too fast into French territory, and supplies haven't kept up with them. Yeah, the troops have moved really fast, and the supply lines have been much slower to get to them. So naturally, the Germans, who are here by July 1918, are hungry because they haven't got any food or enough food. They're low on ammo, and obviously, you need ammo to be able to fight a war. And they actually had to resort to stealing food from captured trenches and French villages. So as to going along, they literally steal food and ammunition wherever they can find it. And something that Year 11 you were reminding me of when we went through the exams in class, another reason why it fails is you can see the Ludendorff Offensive creates a salient, or a bulge if you will. Okay, this huge salient here, which beforehand the trenches have only been able to, you can only really attack the trenches from the front, whereas now the Allies can attack both from the front but also from the side. So it creates this salient that's 130 kilometres long and 65 kilometres wide, so it's very easy to attack it from the sides. So really, in a nutshell, the last major throw of the dice from the Germans, this Ludendorff Offensive, it's the last big risk that they take, the last throw of the dice, and it fails. And from this point on, it is so obvious that the Germans have lost the war. Okay, I mean, as we know, they surrender 4 months later. This is the real beginning of the end for the German forces. It's over at this point. The Ludendorff Offensive, last throw of the dice. It nearly works, as we've seen, early success. They get close to Paris. They push the Allies back. They take out a huge number of Allied soldiers, Allied troops. They break the stalemate, but overall it's a failure because of those reasons I've given there. The Germans have basically no more soldiers left, or no more soldiers in reserve. Their supply lines have been slowed significantly, so the Germans on the front line now are low on ammo and low on food and low on energy and low on morale. And it's created this salient that is very easy for the Allies to attack, and obviously now the Allies have got America helping them out, so it's only a matter of time before the Germans are defeated. So that's the Ludendorff Offensive. I hope that has cleared up any issues that Year 11 you were having, or Year 10, obviously if any of you have been watching as well and you were a bit stuck on the Ludendorff Offensive, I hope that has cleared up some of those issues. As I say, I'm leaving the comments section open below, so if you have any requests for any videos between now and exam season, then please just leave some comments below and I'll try and get some videos made on whatever it is that you want one made on. Quick reminder again about Tuesday history help sessions for Year 11. Please make sure you go into those. But other than that, thank you for watching, and I will see you soon.